Hello, my name's Zacchaeus, but you might know me by my nickname Shorty. I do not like this nickname, so please don't call me that. There's more to me than my height or lack of it. For that matter, there's more to me than my job. I am a chief tax collector. I know everybody's favorite person, right? Because nobody loves to pay taxes, especially to our Roman overlords who I work for. The truth is, I'm not very popular. That really used to bother me, but it doesn't now. Things have changed. I'd like to tell you how it happened. I've been a tax collector for a long time. I only got promoted to chief tax collector a few years ago. I'll tell you honestly, I took this job for the money. It's hard to get by in Judea, you know. Farmers and shepherds barely keep their families fed. I grew up in a poor family, and I was sick of it. So, when I discovered an opportunity to get rich, I went for it. Yes, that meant I had to cooperate with our conquerors. I excused this in my own mind. I mean, my refusal to cooperate wasn't going to get rid of the Romans, was it? A man has to feed himself and his old parents, and the rest of the people in the household. Why not enjoy an easier existence? I think at the beginning my motivations were noble. But you know, what the old philosophers say, it's true. Over time, money corrupts. You get used to it. You depend on it. You can be careless but survive anyway, because you can buy your way out of anything. After a while, everything starts to look like a money problem. If you have enough money, you can solve it. Money might work for hunger or a house, but it doesn't work with other people. No wonder I didn't have any friends after a while. I treated everyone I met not as a person, but as a thing to be bought or sold. Still, once you have money, it's hard to let go. No matter how lonely and unsatisfying your life is, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have kept on living exactly the same way, but then I started hearing these rumors. They were about a traveling teacher named Jesus. When Jesus preaches, he makes the scriptures come alive. Jesus can heal sick people without a touch. Jesus brought a dead man back to life again. I didn't believe what I heard at first. People want magic to solve their problems? But who needs magic when you got money? I didn't at all think Jesus had anything to offer me. So it wasn't the preaching or the healing or even the raising the dead that got me interested in Jesus. What got my interest was how Jesus called people. He called out to them and invited them into his service, and not for pay either, just for the privilege of being near him and sharing in his mission of preaching and healing. Maybe that caught my attention because it wasn't something money could buy. It was up to Jesus whether he called you. I wondered how Jesus decided who to call. Were the ones he called better or stronger or more religious? Were they poor and desperate or rich and generous? I was curious, so I started asking around. The first story I heard about Jesus calling was this. Jesus caught up with some fishermen who came back from a night's work empty-handed. Jesus said, "Throw your net in the water one more time." They did, and the net was full to the breaking. I guess these fishermen were more frightened than excited. One of them said, "You'd better go away and leave us, sir. We are ordinary sinners, and we don't deserve your blessings." But instead of doing that, Jesus said, "Follow me. We've got work to do. We have people to catch." And so, just like that, the fishermen abandoned their boat and went off to work for Jesus. That was only the beginning. Those 3 fishermen were the first, Peter, James, and John. But after a while, Jesus called more men into his service. He had 12 men in his inner circle. Disciples, they were called. Nobody could figure out what made them so special. Most were ordinary people, fishers and farmers and shepherds. Then, after some time passed, Jesus recruited more people, more than 70 in all, to go around and preach for him. He told them what to say and do, and they did it. Apparently, they came back extremely happy. They loved doing Jesus' work of talking about God's kingdom and blessing people and sending away evil spirits and laying on hands for healing. Again, I wondered, what makes them so special? Why did Jesus call them? I think in my heart, I was extremely jealous that there was something out there in the world that money couldn't buy. But then I heard another story that gave me hope. It was about a tax collector like me. His name was Levi. He sat in the booth at the entrance to the city, collecting import taxes from merchants. Levi was a Jew, like me, working for the bad guys, like me. I'm too important now to sit in the tax booth because I'm the chief tax collector, but I used to have Levi's job. It's horrible. Everybody hates you. They don't treat you like a human being. But I guess I didn't treat them like human beings either. Anyway, the point is, I didn't really understand why Jesus would call fishermen and farmers and shepherds to work for him. Completely ordinary, unspecial people. But I was absolutely shocked that Jesus would call a tax collector to work for him. And I wasn't the only one to be shocked. When Jesus called Levi into his service, Levi immediately abandoned the tax booth, and his job, it seems. But since he still had plenty of money for the moment, he threw a big party in his house for Jesus. He even invited the other tax collectors to the party. The local religious people came to the party too, but not because they approved of Levi, just the opposite. They hated him. Why they still went into his house, I don't know. I guess, enjoy the food and feel superior. But even people who hate the rich are happy to take advantage of them. Those religious people were sitting right at Levi's table, yet they complained out loud. Who does Jesus think he is, showing honor to tax collectors? Jesus overheard them and said, "Don't you get it? If you already know God, you're fine. You don't need help. I'm not here to help the people who already know God. I'm here for the people who are lost and lonely, who are sick and corrupt, who have made all the wrong choices in life. I'm here to get them back on the right path again. How will they do that unless I call to them and invite them back into God's house?" Wow! I understood then what people said about Jesus preaching. For the first time, I was able to take a hard look at my own life. I realized how my property made me desperate for money, and then how my money made me greedy and inhuman. And I also realized that I thought I was stuck being that way forever. I couldn't imagine a different future. I definitely didn't think God wanted anything to do with me, but Jesus was willing to call out to bad people and to be friends with them and point them toward a different future. So needless to say, when the word came that Jesus was in our town, I knew I had to see him. Jesus spoke to Levi the tax collector, right? So maybe Jesus would speak to Zacchaeus, the chief tax collector, too. Of course, as I mentioned, I'm not very tall. By the time I got out on the streets, the crowds were so thick waiting for Jesus that I couldn't push through the front of the line, and I couldn't see over the people's heads. So I did a ridiculous and undignified thing. I climbed into a tree. Jesus came along then, laying his hands on people, blessing them. Right as he passed by my tree, Jesus looked up. He looked right into my eyes. I had the feeling that he'd known me my whole life. Then he called out, "Zacchaeus!" How did he know my name? I've never figured it out, but he called me. He said, "Hurry down out of that tree. I'm having a dinner at your house today." Then he kept walking along through the crowds, talking to people and blessing them. The truth is, I almost fell out of that tree. I was so surprised. I raced home. I felt people's eyes on me. They were kind of angry. Out of all the people in the town, why did Jesus choose me, a rotten tax collector, a sinner who lived the opposite of God's ways? I didn't know either. The second I got into my house, I ordered the best dinner I could afford. I felt like someone who'd been let out of prison, or someone who'd spent a long night afraid and awake, but then at last the sun rises. Then Jesus came into the door that evening. I didn't even wait until he got to the table. I said to him, "I'm going to change everything about my life. I'm going to give away half of what I own to people who need it more than I do. And if I've cheated anyone by taking more taxes than they owed, I'll pay it back. In fact, I'll pay back 4 times as much as what I took. I don't want to be controlled by money anymore. I want to use it for the right things from now." Jesus smiled at me. It was a wonderful smile. He said, "Zacchaeus, you are a son of Abraham the righteous. You lost your way, but now you're on the right track again. Salvation has come to you as a gift, and you've welcomed it with open arms. Now, let's go have some dinner." Jesus really does care about people who have lost their way. Jesus doesn't call people because they're perfect or special. Jesus calls people because they're lost and confused, corrupt and misguided, controlled by all the wrong things. Jesus calls people to set them free and point them straight. Jesus doesn't even need to lay down the law with them. Just being called by Jesus makes you want to set your life in order. That's how it was for me. I hope it will be the same for you.